Here with Tony from Make Noise at Superbooth. Bit of a different approach to the gear footage and other things that we're going to see from the event. Wanted to chat about sort of philosophies on integrating digital modules with analog modules, sort of based on and improved or tweaked upon older analog designs.
Yeah, sure. My philosophy with digital is pretty simple. Digital should basically be the same as analog. When you use it, it should feel very analog. The person at the end of the chain, the end user, the artist, should basically interface with a digital module in a way to where they would not know the difference. So DPO or telharmonic, it should all feel very, very similar for the user as far as their experience in using the module.
Yeah, so the back end is almost irrelevant to the end result.
I really think it is, and I think especially at this point, as the quality of digital, I shouldn't say the quality, because the quality of digital has actually been superb for quite a while. It's more been in my generation, in my lifetime, it's been more about the quality of digital coming down in price enough to where people can actually afford it. So when I was a kid, cassette tapes were the medium of the day. And then when CDs came out, they were a lot more expensive than cassette tapes initially, and they didn't sound that good. I think initially there was a lot of people who complained about the sound quality. But as time went on, CDs became the same price as cassettes, and then cassettes were phased out, and suddenly CDs sounded amazing. They sounded as good as anything else you could hope to get. And I think we're kind of seeing the same thing with what's available to hardware developers. In the 80s, to do a 24-bit DAC that could operate at 48 kilohertz would have been quite expensive.
Yeah.
And today it's very easy for me to go and have a wide selection of 24-bit 96 kilohertz audio codecs that are both operating as an ADC and a DAC for very, very affordable price.
Yeah. Price of chips coming way down.
Exactly. Price of chips is almost the price of chips.
Yeah. Or fries.
So I think now that we've got that out of the way, I think now really what we have to concentrate on is, well, what's worth doing digitally and what's worth doing in analog. And some things are just so easy and fun to do in analog that why would you want to go to all the trouble to develop them digitally? And some things are so hard to do in analog, or maybe even impossible, to where you say, yeah, well, we have to do this with digital signal processing. But still, at the end of the day, and this includes all the people that we work with, because I don't develop digital on my own. I've developed it with a very small team. Tom Erb, who does our sound hack modules, Matthew Sherwood, who just did the Tempe with us, and Robert Lowy, or Yerpa 58 as he prefers to be called, who did the Rene and the Mistron with us. And so what we always do, and what a lot of my job is when I'm working with them, is to make sure that the digital module just feels like another analog module in the system, and they all integrate well and play well and feel good and fun to use.
Yeah. So I think most people, including whether they're going for an all-Make Noise system or all from somewhere else, or a hybrid or Frankenstein system, probably have some digital and analog. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the Make Noise lineup going in terms of analog and digital? Do you feel that digital's offering a way of creating a lot of new things to add to what's already there, or a fairly even split? Have you a preference almost for working with one over the other, or?
Well, for me, a modular synthesizer, maybe I still feel it's maybe a little bit simpler of a thing that I think what a lot of the people out there using them today feel like they should be. For me personally, a modular synthesizer is still a small little suitcase that you could carry with you somewhere and patch up some cool sounds and play them. I think modular synthesizers for a lot of people today are growing to where they want almost it's
a studio in itself.
Studio environment. Yeah, exactly. They want to produce an entire track with a system. So systems are growing a lot larger and denser and more complex. And so I think that's one thing we have to take in consideration as we're developing. It's not necessarily are we going to develop analog or digital. It's more, are we going to develop something that integrates into this instrument that I'm sort of envisioning? That would be something like the shared system or the system Cartesian. Or are we developing something that fits into a larger environment, this sort of electronic music studio environment?
Well, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of a big thing at NAMM was a sort of performance mixer, and that's obviously as a system grows bigger, small 3-4 channel mixers aren't good enough. Panning, aux sends, it's becoming. I think someone at the event said I don't want to take a Mackie desk out, or any brand of desk out. I want it in the modular.
Want it in one box, yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, do you not see your systems growing so big? Do you like to see systems? Something we talk about on the podcast I'm doing with Matthew holding the camera and myself is the idea of voices and instruments in themselves. And people will know from the videos I do have a large system. There's a lot of things in there, but I love the idea of 2 or 3 rows being one thing, whether that's my sort of Polyvox acid box or, I like small systems. Is that very much in line with what you want to do, or do you see it?
My personal philosophy, sure, yeah, exactly, and that's why we offer the shared system. Still, I mean, it to me it's a complete instrument that someone could, take the lid off and play in the same way they would play a guitar or a violin or maybe even a saxophone.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, but I'm not opposed to also people who want to build a wall of modular.
No, neither am I. But it's personal. I really do love the. Today I'm taking out this. In the same way you choose the right guitar for the right gig. If you had a selection of guitars, I like that approach. One thing I use a lot, and it always amazed me when I first saw it, is using pressure points, for example, as a sort of preset sequencer. Where do you see controls and interfacing going? Have you new ideas for modules in that respect, or things generally that you'd like to see?
Well, yeah, so that's another thing that we've been developing quite a bit. So we launched that control cell series. We didn't launch it, actually. We showed it for the first time 3 NAMMs ago, and then we came back and we redeveloped it, showed it again at NAMM a couple of years ago, and then we came back and redeveloped it into the Tempe, which we showed at NAMM this year. And I feel like sometimes if you have a module that is capable of really, really deep programming, I feel like it could benefit from some sort of state storage so that you could create something, a sort of state, where the module is doing something that you're really excited about and that is working for you. And because it takes a lot of effort to program it, you might want to be able to store that and come back to it later. Now, that's not to be confused with the word preset, which for me, the word preset is kind of it's a loaded word.
Yeah, I said preset for pressure points. There's nothing preset. There's 3 knobs. There's 3 rows. But by that, I mean 3 voltages that by storing them, they're just 3 knobs set in certain positions, but using those different outs to affect other things, and sort of slowly as a patch evolves, pad 1 is sort of one part of a set, pad 2 sends voltages and takes me somewhere else. So I think preset's a bit of a loaded word.
It is a loaded word. That would imply that you could walk into your Guitar Center and touch one key and get instant techno. But so I try not to use the word preset. I try to use the word state because I'm thinking more like a module could be in a state that you've set it up to be, where when a clock comes in, it does this and that, and then it runs at this rate. And I think sometimes being able to recall states, especially for someone who's trying to compose entirely in a modular environment, to use the word people like to use, which is kind of a funny word, but the modular environment, they could make a lot of use of state changes. But I also think state changes could be really... it could almost become like a macro modulation. I
think macro is a good word. That's something that I came from software, and that's very much what the pressure points are doing. It's sort of macro control over a system. One knob is affecting wave folders, dry wet effects on dry wet on effects, and it's sort of a macro control of, well, I guess the state of the full system. I kind of like, as we said, this small thing, pressure points, for example, switching up a lot of other things. Well, and so being able to have those stored states, I think the other important thing is being able to modulate them just like another parameter. And so that was something we had to spend a lot of time on. And I don't think people have really scratched that surface even quite yet with the Tempe. Maybe some people are, but there's this idea of being able to modulate the state with analog voltages, LFOs, random voltages, sequences, envelopes, all of these things. And that was actually quite a bit of work because you have to make the states change in a way that's graceful and musical and doesn't sound like you've just kicked the module down a flight of stairs. Yeah.
So That actually was quite a bit of work, and I think that work will pay off as we release more modules that can store states.
Yeah,
and
you've got the back end.
Yeah, you've got the back end. You can start to make really dramatic shifts in a patch with just one control voltage, where you're changing all your states at once. The other thing I wanted to be able to do, and this is something that's very unlike the preset, is if you have a bunch of states. Presets are typically numbered, so you have preset number 9 and preset number 10. What would be really interesting to me is if you had a bunch of modules that can store states, you could have also, just like with control voltages, you could offset and attenuate and invert so that you're not going to number 9 on all 3 of your state storage modules. You could have one going to 9, and then you could have the other attenuated a bit so that when this one goes to 9, the one over here would go to 7. And then maybe midway through your set, you increase the gain so it goes to 11 instead of 9. Yeah, I think being able to basically create, jumble up the state system, if you will, so that you're not always going to all states are at 9. You might want that sometimes.
Yeah.
But you also want to be able to create those variations where you're jumbling up the states.
Yeah. There seems to be a separation between people saying, I'm live, I take this out, I gig. So they want a certain sort of performance system. They want the instrument. And the guys that want the big studio system, and I'm not, I've got my own ideas, but I see both sides. But for me, the state thing I think is important for the studio as well, in terms of sort of inspiration and motivation to do things. If I'm trying to sort of craft, even if I'm trying to craft something to take it out live, if I have to stop and think and repatch everything, and I lose it the day after, I think the inspiration may not be there when I wake up the next day if I can't recall these ideas.
Yeah, I mean, here's how I'm imagining it. You spend a bunch of time, for example, maybe programming a bunch of clocks into your tempi, and you've got them patched out to all these specific places, and it sounds really great. And then you make another state where those clocks are quite different, or maybe they're just a slight variation on those. Let's say you make 16 variations on that theme. You come back the next day and think about what could happen if you had some other modules that stored states, and you start jumbling those states up. So you're using tempi state 9 with your function generator state 11 instead of 9. You're sort of just, once you start jumbling it up, you're exponentially increasing the possibilities.
Yeah, and I think those ideas for a lot of people probably come when they're not actually at the module as well.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And so you spend a bunch of time making, like you said, something that you're pretty excited about. Then when you come back to it later, it's not exciting anymore. But if you could jumble those up, it might rekindle the inspiration. Another thing to think about too, and this is where I think modular kind of exceeds the possibilities of a preset-based synthesizer, repatching. So just because you've stored a bunch of states in a sequencer or a clocking device or a function generator, doesn't mean you have to keep it patched to that same destination. Yeah. So you have that state, and you did it with it patched to, say, the strike inputs on your Optimix, but now you take that same tempi state and you patch to some sequencers and maybe another clock divider that's driving your tempo input on your Echophone and so on and so forth. Suddenly that state you spent all that time programming is a completely new thing.
And I think that's where the word preset is wrong, and why it's because it's not within the module. It's maybe preset, but you can't preset cables.
Exactly.
So
right.
I think that's where it sort of builds.
You don't want to.
No. Well, get a computer at that point.
Get a computer or get a Mini Moog Voyager. I mean, these are that's a very complex instrument that sounds wonderful, and it has, I think, they have like 999 presets on it now.
Yeah.
I mean, just get that.
Yeah, there are instruments to do that. Yeah. We were just, again, when my bumbling SD card incident, we were just getting onto the no coast, and the idea of a sort of small contained instrument within itself. Is that something you're wanting to develop to either complement modular or to give users a different experience? Will we see anything else like that? Or
yeah, I think it was high time to just give users a different experience, or people who wanted to experience the sound of Make Noise but didn't want to get into modular, because believe it or not, there that's like a thing that
yeah.
people will ask us about.
Yeah, we'd think people with the channels, well, your own channel, your own modules, and my channel, that's all it's about. It's not. And as you said, there are other instruments for different things.
Right.
So
yeah.
do you really see it as the sort of mini make noise experience?
I do. I think we really tried to put a lot of the basic building blocks from our systems into a small package. Obviously, all of the parameters are reined in. With the modular systems, with a shared system, for example, we give you all the rope you need to hang yourself. I mean, it's so easy to make absolutely no sound, or some of the worst sound you've ever heard, as well as it is to make wonderful sound with a shared system. With the no coast, it's been reined in so that it's easier for someone to just make what they would call musical sound.
Yeah, I think guiding the user.
Yeah,
it's not a limited experience, but it's the ranges of controls. Yeah, a focused experience.
It's focused for melodic playing from a keyboard device or a sequencer. It's very focused on that.
So is that where the name No Coast came from? It's not. It's when you say melodic and potentially from a keyboard or a sequencer, that's potentially a little bit more East Coast.
Yeah, sure. The whole thing kind of has elements of each. And so at the sound generation, very West Coast, very Buchla inspired and Serge inspired. It's a triangle core VCO that feeds an overtone generator that takes the square wave from the core as well and throws a spike into it and lets you shift that spike around to create different types of overtones. And then the overtone generator feeds a multiplier, which allows you to create more overtones.
A series of harmonics.
Series of harmonics that are all above the fundamental in frequency. So very West Coast sound generation. On the other half, the back end, if you will, is more East Coast. But I chose deliberately to avoid the classic East Coast formula, which is the low pass, 24 dB per octave low pass filter. I felt like there's enough people that have done that already, and I wanted to look at something that I find very interesting about the Mini Moog, which was the loudness contour. It was kind of a simple 4-stage envelope that had 3 controls instead of 4.
Yeah, with the link, decay, and release times.
Exactly, they link the decay and release times, and I really like that. And the reason I really like that is it's amazing how much removing that one parameter. It's amazing how much it simplifies developing an envelope sound that you're happy with.
Well, I really like that when I've played with Minimos on device based on them, that I get the extra stages, but it's not an AD or it's not an ADSR.
Yeah. It's just such. It was always something that every time I played a Mini Moog, I thought, it's just so nice how they kind of chucked that one knob.
It gives that vibe of, with the decay and release being linked, long and short notes being held still give you a long note. If the decay is too long and you've got a high release and you take the note off, you don't get the release because the decay. So never. Well, you would, but if the notes. I'm saying this wrong. If you hold a note too long and the sustain's too low, you don't get the long release because the sustain's not low enough.
This is exactly what I'm
confusing myself,
about.
But it
gets complicated.
Yeah. Then the two. I do know what I'm on about sometimes.
I know you know what you're talking about, but I think this exemplifies my case.
It's a much simpler. This is the length of the falling portion, but it still gives you more than the 2-stage envelope.
Exactly, and it still gives you what I think is one of the really, really differentiating points between what we typically identify as a West Coast sound versus an East Coast sound. West Coast sounds were, if you listen to the records made on the Buchla systems in the 70s, they're very full, chock full of these short percussive sounds that are played and like almost like pulse streams, almost like streams of notes. And on the East Coast end, you have a more something that sounds like it's played with an organ.
Not as transient and percussive, I think.
Right more sustain, more notes, something more like an organ because it was developed to be played with an organ keyboard. And so the loudness contour on the No Coast implements that technique, which is, to me, inherently East Coast. That technique's driving the dynamic circuit, which is a low-pass gate that was implemented without Vactrols. So instead, it was implemented with the transistor-based OTA, which is an inherently East Coast circuit, I suppose, more like an East Coast VCA.
You still get the low-pass effect of the tone and the volume control by the same thing.
Exactly, yeah. So that's a sort of merger of the two. Prior to the dynamics is the balance circuit, which was my idea with that was to sort of implement a quasi-low pass filter, because on one half of the balance is the fundamental, the triangle chord, and then on the other half is the overtone. So as you sweep it, it is not unlike sweeping a low pass filter. Yeah. It's also not exactly like it.
No, well, it's a crossfade between the harmonic content and the fundamental, but it's similar.
Effect. It's also really useful for people who want to play melodic lines, because sometimes you can get your harmonics so animated that the timbre almost masks the pitch.
We had this exact conversation about ring modulation with a couple of people at the event, that you go so far and you lose the fundamental, and you're having to mix in the fundamental, or even in a really East Coast setting with a really aggressive resonant filter and plenty of drive or feedback, typical mini-mode trick, still mixing in. If you can pull a triangle in after the filter
and mix it back.
After the sort of filter saw, you just get that weight back in, and the fundamental, I said, it can go, well, it's great for sound design, it can go way too far and lose what you're actually playing.
Yeah, suddenly your sequence is almost more related to how the fundamental pitch is intermodulated with all the timbral animation. Grant Richter many years ago had talked to me about this idea of reintroducing the fundamental after your filter. And it always kind of stuck with me as a sort of a cool trick. I believe he said it was implemented in the I feel like he said it was implemented in the Yamaha CS series, but I'm not. My memory isn't that good for that conversation. But I just remember him talking about reintroduction of the fundamental, and so that's sort of where that balance circuit comes in.
Well, it's definitely a sort of preset, for the loaded word, but a cable going from one place to another in my system that happens a lot. Sine or triangle into my mixer after the filter or the folder or the ring modulator or whatever we're doing. So to sort of round up, one person, sort of, I won't go, what's coming, and obviously plenty of new stuff are coming, lots of ideas, and with other people and yourself. But
I like your confidence.
Yeah. Oh, I know you're full of great ideas.
I've not got shit.
We'll make something up. But a sort of personal one from using the software that was introduced for a while ago. Sort of personal question: is there some new things coming with Tom Erb? Is there ideas amongst
Tom? He's one of my favorite people to work with. I think because I really feel, and hopefully if he watches this, hopefully he agrees, I really feel like I connect with Tom. That from the first time I met him and we talked about the phonogene, which is how he found me. He saw that someone had made a module called the phonogene, and so he wanted to meet the person to make it and that made it, and he wanted to get to know if they actually knew what a phonogene was, or if they just made up the word or just lifted it off the internet somewhere. And we had a really great conversation about the phonogene and Pierre Schaeffer. And from then on, I just always felt like he and I really, really connected. If we start talking about an idea for an algorithm or a module, it's almost like I barely have to tell him anything, and he's already like 99% the way there. And the first software revisions he'll send me, or firmware revisions he sends me, will always just blow my mind at how wonderful they sound. I really just feel like we have a good connection. So we'll definitely be working with him more.
Well, that was my introduction to Tom, was through the SoundHack software.
SoundHack,
and the phase vocating, the convolution, things I was doing on a computer a few years ago, it was the sound that sort of amazed. I didn't know who Tom was at the time, but then having used the modules, the Verb and Echophon, that's sort of a personal thing that I'm dying to see you and Tom do something else.
Yeah, and I think he's really excited because software is it's a wonderful thing, but it's also a temporary thing to some degree, because as the operating systems continue to advance, if the software developer doesn't continue to advance their code, the software can be forgotten. And so that was something that he talked to me about right at the very start of our relationship. He really wanted to put some of his algorithms into a physical form where they could exist on past his lifetime. Yeah. And so the Echophone, which is somewhat related to his plus pitch delay. And we talked about some of the other ones and implementing them eventually. But then also some new things like the herb verb, which you know he's never done a reverb plugin.
No.
So he's really excited about that idea, that his life's work, because Tom has been in DSP forever. You know, he didn't just pick it up 2 years ago. I mean, he's been doing it since the early 80s. And I think his life work, he was maybe concerned that it wouldn't be able to live on because he would continue to maintain the code. Now we have a hardware platform where it can continue to live on past his lifetime. And I think that excites him quite a bit.
I think that, strangely, because I bumble around a lot, that's sort of naturally rounded up to a really nice ending. That for me, the modular, in the same way as an old 50s Telecaster guitar, is a relevant instrument within itself. Be it, and to wing back to the start again, these things sometimes happen. I can't plan this. It rings back to the original digital analog thing. It's irrelevant. It's the end tactile instrument that we interface with, and I think that's, for me, the beauty of modular.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
So pretend we planned that. And thank you very much.
Yeah, man.
Cheers.
Great to talk to you.
Yeah.